Oh, the crisis is interesting, as it shows the self-protecting nature. The self-protecting nature of the world and the divine laws. It is a law of the world. As much immorality as there is, so much misery. The greatest prosperity will in vain resist the greatest calamity. You borrow the succor of the devil, and he must have his fee. We've never been able to combine any pure prosperity. There's always something in the very advantages of a condition which hurts it. Africa has its malformation. England has its Ireland. Germany its hatred of classes. France its love of gunpowder. Italy its Pope. And America, the most prosperous country in the universe, has the greatest calamity in the universe: Negro slavery. Negro slavery. Now let me remind you in some detail how natural retribution acts in reference to the statute which Congress passed a year ago. For these few months have shown very conspicuously its nature and impracticality. The Fugitive Slave Law is contravened by man's duty. Secondly, it is contravened by all the sentiments. Thirdly, it is contravened by the written laws themselves. Fourthly, it is contravened by the mischiefs by which it operates. Fifthly, and above all, it is contravened by the dignity and earnestness of the advocates of freedom who were inspired to oppose it. It is contravened first by the sentiment of duty. An immoral law makes it a man's duty to break it at every hazard. For virtue is the very self of every man. It is therefore a principle of law. An immoral contract is void. An immoral statute is void. For as laws do not make right, and are simply declaratory of a right that already exists, it is not to be presumed that the laws can so stultify themselves as to command injustice. Here is a statute which enacts the crime of kidnapping. Kidnapping, a crime on one footing with arson and murder. Yet a man's right to liberty is as inalienable as his right to life. Pains seem to have been taken to give us in this statute a pure wrong with no mixture of right. If our resistance to this law is not right, there is no right. This is not meddling with other people's affairs. This is hindering other people from meddling with us. This is not going crusading into Virginia and Georgia after slaves. This is befriending in our own state, on our own farms, a man who has taken the risk of being shot or burned alive or cast into the sea or starved to death or suffocated in a wooden box to get away from a slave driver. And this man who has run the gauntlet of 1,000 miles for his freedom. This statute says, you men in Massachusetts, you shall hunt, shall catch, and shall send him back again to slavery. Jurist Lord Coke of England held that where an act of Parliament is against the right and reason, common law shall control it and judge it to be void. Others have also ruled that no engagement, even to a sovereign, can oblige or authorize a man to violate the laws of nature. Against a principle like this, all the arguments of Mr. Webster are the spray of a child's squirt against a granite wall. It is contravened, secondly, by the sentiments. How can a law be enforced that finds pity, that imprisons charity? As long as men have bowels, they will disobey. You know that the Act of Congress of September 1850 is a law which every one of you will break on the earliest occasion. There's not a manly Whig or a manly Democrat of whom, if a slave were hidden in one of our houses from the hounds, we should not ask with confidence to lend his wagon in aid of his escape, and he would lend it. And here I may say, it is absurd what I often hear to accuse the friends of freedom in the North with being the occasion of the stringency of the Southern slave laws. Absurd. If you starve or beat an orphan in my presence, and I accuse your cruelty, can I help it? Mr. Webster tells the president he has been in the North and found no man whose opinion is of any weight, who is opposed to this law. Oh no, Mr. President, trust not his information. The Fugitive Slave Law is contravened, thirdly, by the written laws themselves, because the sentiments, of course, write the statutes. Laws are merely declaratory of the natural sentiments of mankind, and the language of all permanent laws will be in contradiction to any new immoral enactment. And thus it happens here, statute fights with statute. By the law of Congress 1807, it is piracy and murder to enslave a man on the coast of Africa. By the law of Congress September 1850, it is high crime and misdemeanor, punishable by fine and imprisonment, to resist re-enslaving a man on the coast of America. Offshore, it is piracy and murder to enslave him. Onshore, it is fine and imprisonment not to re-enslave him. What kind of legislation is this? What kind of constitution covers it? And yet the crime which the second law ordains is greater than the crime that the first law forbids. For it is a greater crime to re-enslave a man who has shown himself fit for freedom than to enslave him at first when it might be pretended to be a mitigation of his lot as a captive in war. It is contravened, fourthly, by the mischiefs by which it operates. A wicked law cannot be executed by good men and must be by bad. Flagrant and flagitious men must be employed, and every act of theirs is a stab at the public peace. It cannot be executed at such a cost, so it brings a bribe in its hand. This law has infamy, This law comes with infamy in it and out of it. It offers a bribe in its own clauses for the consummation of the crime. To serve it, low and mean people are found by the groping of the government. No government ever found it hard to pick up tools for base actions. If you cannot find them in the huts of the poor, you can find them in the palaces of the rich. Vanity can buy some, ambition others, and money others. The first execution of the law, as was inevitable, was a little hesitating. The second was easier. And the glib officials in a few weeks became quite practiced and handy at stealing men. Stealing men. Alas, the resistances that appear in the history of this statute and the retributions which speak so loud in every part of this business make me think some tragic poet will know how to make it into a lesson for all ages. Mr. Webster's measure, he told us, was final. But it was a pacification. It was a suppression. It was a measure of conciliation and adjustment. Listen to his words at different times. There was to be no more parleying. He said it was irrepealable. But I ask, does it look final now? His final settlement has dislocated the foundations. The State House shakes like a tent. His pacification has brought all honesty in every house, all scrupulous and good-hearted men, all women and all children to accuse the law. It has brought United States swords into the street and chains around the courthouse. Is this pacification and union? Now, what is the effect? What is the effect of this law? To make one sole subject of conversation and painful thought throughout the continent, namely slavery. There's not a man of thought or of feeling, but is concentrating his mind on it. The only benefit that is accrued from this law is its service to education. It has been like a university to an entire people. It has turned every dinner table into a debating club and made every citizen a student of natural law. When a moral quality comes into politics, when a right is invaded, the discussion draws on deeper and deeper sources. General principles are laid bare which shed light on the whole frame of society. But at last, it is a cheering to me to behold what champions the emergency called to this poor black boy. What virtue, what logic, what learning, what exposure of the mischiefs of this law, and above all, with what earnestness and dignity the advocates of freedom were inspired to oppose it. That 'twas one of the best compensations of this calamity.